Hi everyone, so I'm back again to do another video for you. This time I'm going to do Bougainvillea. I've got one of the branches here that I've already made up to give you an idea. So I'm just going to pop that to one side and we'll get on to the equipment. While I'm getting down to the equipment, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and if you've got any comments about anything or anything you'd like to see me do, then please leave them in the comments below. So down to my board. Right, so the equipment that I'm going to use for this are both for the bracts and for the leaves. I'm going to use simple leaf cutters. I've got 3 different sizes here. I'll explain about what I'm going to do with each of the sizes when I get onto them. And I'm going to use a rose leaf veiner for doing the veining on both the bracts and the petals. You also need a small cell stick, the smallest that they do, if you can get hold of one of these. If you haven't got one of these, then you can use a cocktail stick. You also need a small plunger blossom cutter for making the flowers in the centre. I'm going to use 28 gauge green wire for the leaves and for the centres, and the same size for the petals, for the bracts rather, on the coloured part of the flower. So I'm going to start off by cutting these wires up. What I'm going to do with this one, because I'm only going to, as you know, I only do one of each, I'm just going to cut this in half, and then I'm going to cut 1/2 into 2. That will make a couple of leaves out of it. And then I'm going to cut this one into 3, which will be used for the centres, which are the actual flower part of the Bougainvillea. So I'm just going to pop those to one side. Now the paste you need, I've used a pink paste for these. You can see the colour of the petals is quite sort of a purpley pinky colour. They come in all sorts of different colours, from a very pale wishy-washy pink through to a deep purpley reddy colour. And also there is an orange one in them as well. If you do your research on the internet, just put in Bougainvillea, and then pictures will come up of different growers that sell these sort of flowers, and you can see the different colours that you can get on them. And very much like my mind's gone blank. Very much like your poinsettia at Christmas, the showy part of the flower is not actually the flower. That is just another leaf, really. It's just a coloured leaf. Right, so I've got my paste working there, so I'm just going to take some of that off and put some of that back into my little plastic bag and keep that wrapped up. I'm going to put a bit of white vegetable fat on my board to roll out on. And as always, I use my ridge roller for doing my ridges, but you can use the ridge side of the board if you haven't got one of those. Have a word with your local sugar craft shop to see if they've got any of these rolling pins, because if you have to make a lot of them, once you get to the point where you can make quite a lot of petals and leaves and things like that in one go, when you start to work faster, it comes in handy if you've a lot to cut out to be able to cut them all out at once. Or you can get yourself a flexi mat. If you haven't got a flexi mat, then a flat sponge in a plastic bag to lay over your paste, your petals that you've cut out, or leaves or whatever, so that they don't dry out. Right, so I'm going to do my ridge up the centre here of the petals, or the bracts I should say. Just going to come back down and make sure that's a little bit more defined. Just make sure you've got some white fat on your board so that it doesn't ruffle up, because sometimes if you haven't got enough white fat on your board, it sort of comes up and then you end up with creases and all sorts in it. So I'm going to use the largest one of the cutters to make the bracts. So I'm just going to cut out 3 of these per flower. Take that paste away. And then I've got my 3 wires here. I use white wires for these. I always use white wires for petals and green wires for leaves, because you don't want this to show through. And if you get on things where you get your paste really thin, if you use green wires it will show through. Not so much on these, because these are more like a leaf, so they don't need to be quite as thin. But like everything else, if you're not making them too thin, like when you're doing things like lilies and orchids and that type of flower, then you need to make sure that your edges are thin, so you don't have that cut edge on. Because if you look at an actual flower, it doesn't have a thick edge on it, even though it's fleshy. So then we go on to the pad. And then with the small end of my ball tool, I'm going to thin the edges. As you notice, I always leave the ridge upwards. You don't have to do that. It's whichever way is best for you. But I've always worked this way, so it's what you get you used to doing. There isn't a right way or a wrong way for doing the edges on these. You just want to avoid getting a ridge around the edge, so don't go too far in. Keep it right on the very edge, like that, rather than going round like that, because you'll end up with a groove around the side of your petal. So just pop those to one side, get the veiner, and then with the ridge there, that wants to go into the groove on your veiner, like that. Make sure it's central. Pop your top on, give it a press, take it out, and then just make sure you shape it at the bottom, particularly at the bottom here, because that's going to go around the centre. This is a centre I've already got made up here, so that's going to go in there, so you need that to go around, same as you would with a lily or anything like that. And then put it onto your foam to dry. I'm not going to bring the foam over this time, because you've seen me do this many a time in my other videos. For anybody that's new that hasn't watched my videos before, if you go and have a look at some of my others, I usually bring the foam over to show you that. Just shape your petals and then onto your foam. It's like egg box foam. This is actually acoustic foam that I use, that I bought from a firm that does acoustic tiles. Unfortunately, you'd have to buy rather a lot if you did that, but at the time I was teaching at college and had a lot of students, so I found it the cheapest foam to buy, because the ones you buy from sugarcraft shops generally can be quite expensive. It is a cheaper way of doing it, but if you're soundproofing a room and you're putting that on your walls, then keep a couple of tiles of it back. Right, so leaves. Now for the leaves I'm going to do 2 sizes, because one of them is going to be the flower just getting ready, and it's still in its green stage. The others are going to be for some leaves. So I'm only going to do a small amount of these again. You don't need to watch me making loads of leaves. I've already got all my bits and pieces already made up, with some ready to colour for you to see me do that. So we'll start off by rolling this out. I think I might need some more white fat on there. You only need a tiny bit on, just enough for it to stick. You don't need to put loads on. Oops. There we are. It's not like rolling out pastry where you've got to keep picking it up and turning it over, or your sugar paste for your cakes. That's why you need it to stick to your board. Now just a little tip here, I've probably mentioned this before in videos before, I think I've done it. You can tell how thin your paste is just by running your hands over like that. You can feel it if it's thick or if it's thin. I know it doesn't sound as though it makes sense, but it does actually make sense, does that. I've just dropped something on the floor. I don't think it's anything that I'm using. Right, so again, like I did with the bracts, and I think it's my rolling pin that I've dropped. Just bear with me a sec till I find out what it is. No, it's not down there. Yes, it is. It was my rolling pin that I dropped on the floor, so anyway, I've got it now. So I'm just going to do one ridge up the middle here, because I'm only going to cut out a few of these. The colour that I've used to colour this, if I only ever have one green, I don't buy lots of different greens because I can't see the point in it. The green that I use is either Christmas green from Sugar Flare, or Holly and Ivy from Squire's Kitchen. Don't confuse the Holly and Ivy with Squire's Kitchen and Sugar Flare, because the Holly and Ivy from Sugar Flare is very bluey coloured. The Christmas green is a much better green. You only need a background. You can dust it to whatever colour you want. The dusts are cheaper than the pastes are, so keep it to one green in your workbox, and don't confuse things. So I'm going to cut out some more petals. I'm just going to do a couple of leaves for this, of the larger ones, and then for the flower that's just forming I'm going to use the smallest one. So I want 3 of those. Now then, with the one that's just turning colour, this one here, I made the mistake of cutting these out in pink paste and then dusting them with lime green. That was a mistake. So what I would do is to cut those out in the green and then dust them. So I'm going to do that with these. I've already got some that are dried on the side there. So if you cut out another 3 of these, I'm not going to use a ridge. I can get my wire in without that. I might have to get some more wires out, but we'll have a look. So another thing that you can do as well, if you haven't got a groove board or a groove rolling pin, or if you have difficulty getting wires up into your petals and leaves and things like that, I'm going to show you another way of doing it. I'm just going to leave the green paste out for this. I think I've mentioned it in a video before, but it's what they call the lick and stick method, and I'm going to do it on these plain ones that I haven't got a groove on. So I'll just do these first. So I want those 2 there for the leaves. So again, twist your wires in, because these, when you're using these thin wires, they have a habit of unravelling. So if you don't twist it in, you see that's come through now. So I'm going to use the stick and lick method on that. So what you do to do that, I think I've rolled my paste a little bit too thin here. Tiny ball of paste, roll it into a sausage, put your wire up the paste. I'm just going to move my camera because I've gone a bit out of shot here with this. There we are. You should be able to see that now. Right. Bit paste onto your wire like that. Roll it down your wire. Same as you would if you're doing buds and things like that. Same sort of method. Get it very thin, like that. And then if you get your leaf, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to thin the edges on this first before I do that. Or you can do it afterwards, but because I'm going to use my veiner to attach this now, so bit of glue up the side that you're going to attach to your leaf, pop that on there like that, then get your veiner and then turn it over so that that is downwards into your groove. Pop the top on, give it a good press like that, and you've got your leaf on your wire. That's just another way of doing it, but if you can, try and get the wires up your leaves. And I've rolled these a bit thin, so I'm going to do this with all of these now. So I rolled my paste a little bit too thin. I wasn't paying attention what I was doing when I was talking to you. You can roll it down further down your wire, so you roll your paste, you work paste up your wire up to the end of it, so it totally covers your wire, like that. Now if you've got sticky paste like mine, sometimes it works without actually having to put any glue on. So just pop that into there like that. Whoops. I'll thin my edges first. The only reason I do this is because when you come to vein your leaves, some people, particularly in a lot of books, they tell you to vein your leaves after. Just pop that in there and do it this way around. Pop the leaf on top of there like that. Whichever is the easiest for you to do. It's your work. There we are. Pop that in. We'll see if this will stick. If it doesn't stick, you can always add some glue afterwards. It has done. There we are. This paste that I'm using is my own paste. Somebody sent me a message about it the other day. It is the vegan paste that I'm using that doesn't have any eggs in it. If you look through my videos on my channel, there is a video on there showing you how to make it. Now the paste that I've made on there, some people might find a bit stiff to work with. And what you can do is just make another batch of half the amount of Tylose in it and mix it together, don't throw it away. Or when you're making it, just use less Tylose powder. I think there's 2 tablespoons in that, 2 level tablespoons. You have to be very accurate with your measurements. Probably use a tablespoon and a half, and then and do it that way and try it and see how it is. If it's still too stiff, like I said, just make a softer version of it and mix them together to make your paste. There's always a way around things, but it's a damn sight cheaper for you to make your own paste than it is to buy it, as long as you've got the right ingredients. And you can get most of the things that are used, like the glucose and liquid glycerine and things like that. They're selling supermarkets now on the baking section, so you should be able to get hold of those. That's a bit long. Take some of that off. A little bit more off. That's okay. So I'm just going to do this one and then I'm going to leave it at that, because you know how to make leaves. You've seen me do it plenty of times, and I've already got all my dried bits and bats all ready, so you can see the finished products. There we are. And then shape that and put that to dry. Right, so I'm going to get rid of those now, because I've already got the dried ones already made up. Now the next part that you need to make is the centre part, which is where your flowers are. Now generally on the flowers, you don't get all the flowers opening up at the same time. You get a combination of buds and buds and flowers. Now I've already got some buds here. One I've coloured, one I haven't, and I've done them in green paste, and then I've got one here where I've made the flower to go on the top of that, if you can see that. Put it on my hand so you can see it. They are tiny, and that's the fiddly part of making this particular plant. So have I got any thin wires up there? No. Oh, I've got some here. Use them. So I'm just going to use one to make a flower and one to make a bract. So you need a tiny piece of paste. It only needs to be really tiny. If you can see how small that is. That might even be too big when I get it on. So I'm going to roll that into a sausage. Put your 28 gauge wire up it. You could even use a 32 gauge wire or a 30 gauge wire for this, because they don't need any strength in them, because they're going to go in the centre anyway. I'm just going to go a bit past the top and then roll that on. Now the first one that's going to have the flower on it, I'm just going to roll that up the wire like that. That's gone past the end of the wire, so we'll take that off. You only need it to be very short like that, so it's probably about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch long. And then I'm going to do another one, again using the same amount of paste. Roll it into a sausage, onto the wire, and then roll it up. This time I'm leaving a little bit at the top there that I'm not doing anything with. I'm just rolling this underneath so that that sort of swells out a little bit at the top there, just to form a little bud. You can go around and shape that into a little bud. Keep this piece under the... You want to be almost down to the wire with this. They need to be that thin. So if you can see that. Now that's going to be too long, so just measure it aside of that, take some of that off. That's about the same size, so we'll just thin that bottom bit down again onto the wire where I've taken that off. There we are. So you've got a bud and you've got your central piece. Now we'll get rid of that. Now we need some cream coloured paste. I've used cream rather than white because they're a bit of a sort of an off-white colour of the flowers, but by the time you've rolled this out it's going to be so thin it's going to look almost white anyway. The colour I've used for this is Caramel Ivory from Sugar Flare. Wilton also do one the same colour as well, so either that or the Wilton one. They're very good for doing this. Anything that you're going to do cream, if you're doing an ivory wedding cake and you want to do piping on it, which obviously has got to be ivory, I use that to put in the royal icing. Just a tiny little end of a cocktail stick to colour it, so you just get that off-white colour that matches up with your ivory sugar paste. Just be careful how much you put in. You can always add to, you can't take out. Right, so worked my paste there, so I only need a small amount of paste for this because I'm only going to do one here. So I'm just going to flatten that out onto my board, and then with the rolling pin roll that out like that, so it's really thin. so you can see how thin that is. Really thin. Let's pop that back down there. Then get your plunger blossom cutter, pick it up with the plunger blossom cutter onto your foam pad, and then press your plunger. So it doesn't matter about cupping it too much, so you don't need soft foam for this, which you would normally use for doing plunger blossom cutters, but we're going to do another thing with this to oops, there it is, to get the frilly edges on it. So I'm going to work this again, and this is where you need the small cell stick. Just get rid of those and put those into my little block here. One in there, one in there, and then the ones that I've already made that I've got ready to colour into there. Now this is where you need your little cell pin. Wherever I've done it, I've lost it again. It's so small you can't see it. What have I done with it? It's rolled down here somewhere. Ah, there it is, hiding underneath all my other equipment. So this is the fiddly bit. I'm going to do this on my hand so you can see what I'm doing. So what you do is get the point of it and roll it to stretch each of the little petals. I know some people are going to be saying, oh my god, what are you doing here? But the thing is, it does look effective when you've done it. This is why we charge so much for sugar flowers. I mean, anybody that's thinking of doing them for somebody that they're charging for, you have to take into account all these things. How long it takes you to do these jobs. Because as I say, time is money. Right, so I'm just going to turn that over, upside down. And the piece that I did without the bud on the top, there it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to colour this first. I'm just going to pop that to one side, and this is the mistake I made when I was doing mine. I nearly knocked the flowers off because I didn't colour them first. So here I've got a combination of two colours that I've mixed together that I'm going to use for the bracts. I've got violet from Edible Art and pink. They're both in the blacktop range. It's just called pink, is that one. There are other pinks, but that's just called pink. And then I've mixed it together to get the colour that I want. And I'm just going to dust this before I put the top on. This saves you knocking the flower off after you've done it, which is what I should have done in the first place, and I didn't. There we are. And while I've got the colour there, I'm just get your bud that you've already dried and colour that as well. There we are. You can see that. Put it against the paper, then you can see that. Right, so I'll just get rid of that for a minute. We'll come back to that when I'm ready for colouring all my other bits and pieces. And what I'm going to do now is bring the flower back that I've just done. I'm just going to put a bit of glue right on the very edge, top there of that. Then just pop that down onto the flower like that. Pick it up onto the end. So if you can see that. And then just leave that to dry. Drop something else on the floor, but it's something that I don't need, fortunately. Right, so once you've got all your bits and pieces together, then what you need to do then is tape your buds and flowers together. Now what I've done is on mine I've done a combination of some with 2 flowers and a bud, and some with 2 buds and a flower. I just find that doing it like that just makes it look more interesting rather than doing all buds and all flowers, because generally they don't all open out at the same time anyway, so I just find it looks more effective that way. Your decision, your flower, you do it your way and I do it mine. Right, colours. So I'll just bring the colours down, move that out of the way. Right, now this is going to be the right way that I've done the little partly coloured flowers. So what I'm going to do is, this is what I should have done in the first place and I didn't when I did this arrangement. There it is. I've got some lime green here. This one is Tropical Lime from Edible Art, which is the palest green. So whatever make you're using, find the palest one you can. Lime green. There is one called lime green, but it's a little bit darker than the tropical lime. That's a paler colour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dust from the bottom upwards on these, and these will form the flowers that are just starting to open. So if I do that on each of those, just pop that down on there, turn it over and do the back. The backs and fronts on the bracts are about the same, whereas on a normal leaf the back would be paler than the front. But on these they appear to be the same colour on back and front. So that's those. Then I'm going to go on to the pink mixture that I've mixed together here, and I'm just going to give them a little bit of colour at the top there, so they're just turning to the colour you want. Now that's gone on better than it did on the first ones that I've already done, that I've put into my spray. That looks better. I didn't realise when I did it that when I put the lime green onto the pink that it would come out yellow. Not what you expect, is it? Try not to get too much powder on your brush. I've just got some wet on the green there where I didn't want it, so just be very careful of that. I got pulled up at that in competition when I used to do competitions at the NEC. Specks that I couldn't see, but they must go over them with a magnifying glass to be able to see any specks that I couldn't see. Right, so we can put those to one side. And the small ones at the top, then they're just dusted with lime green all over. I've already put those together, so I'm not going to go through those. The bracts, which ones are the dry ones there? Those are dry. Here are going to be dusted all over with the lilac and pink, and I need to mix some more up because I'm running a little bit short there. So this is the pink that I've used there. You can see that colour. And then I've mixed that with the violet, which is one of the lighter purple ones. There are darker ones. If you want a darker one, just use a darker colour. So I'll mix some of that in with it. Mix those together. It's always a good idea to mix enough. This might be a bit darker than the ones I've already done, because once you've mixed it, it's very difficult to replicate it when you're mixing colours together, so be careful of that. If you've got a spare pot, you can always mix them up and then you've got the colour already made, haven't you? I don't normally have to mix my colours with theirs because they've got such a wide range of colours. So we just dust all over with this, and the back as well. that to one side. Yeah, that's a little bit darker than the ones I've already done, but never mind. I've already got all the bits and pieces already made up anyway. Make sure you get the edges as well, because you don't want the pink to show through, because there's no variation on the colour on these. They're just a flat colour all over. Sometimes with leaves you need to use more than one colour just to make them look lifelike, but depends what kind of flower you're making, really. Again, it's your choice, because the one advantage of making your own flowers as well is you can use artistic license. If you want a specific colour and there isn't a specific colour in that flower, if you want to make it in that colour, you can do, can't you? As long as it's a realistic, what I call a realistic colour that doesn't look as though it wouldn't belong to that flower. That's what I always say anyway. Right, so once that's done, I want my green brush now, which is under that. Put those to one side. Now for the leaves I'm using ginkgo, which is sort of like a mid-green. I use this quite a lot. Anybody that's watched my other videos will know that I like my ginkgo. If you're doing things like roses and you're doing light colours like whites, pinks, yellows, that sort of thing, the leaves tend to be lighter on them, so you use a lighter green. I've just dropped one of my leaves on the floor and just dust it all over on the front, and without adding any more colour, just give a waft over the back as well, and put that to one side. So that's colouring your leaves, and then obviously the buds that you've got, I've got another one here. I'll just go through that again with my other brush. There it is, with the colour dust all over with that. You don't want a flat colour on those. You want the green to show through a bit, because you want it to look as though it's turning that colour rather than being a dense colour like the bracts on your flowers, on your flowers. So I'll just move those out of the way. Right, assembly. So I've got a centre already made up there, so I'm just going to put this one together and do each of the flowers separately. Don't forget to stretch your tape to see which is the sticky side, and then start it off underneath your bracts and then put your flowers rather. Bend your wires back and put your flowers in, your bracts in rather. I'm confusing myself here, aren't I? I'm having one of those days. Bend it back in and wind it round. Now I'll just show you something when I've taped this down. Just tape that right down to the bottom. I taped all the way down to the bottom with the centres before I put the bracts on, because you find that things stay in place a lot better because you've got something to grip onto if you've taped down in between. Because I've curved the bottoms of the bracts round, you see how they fit round the centre. If you didn't do that, they wouldn't fit round. I've got a bit of green on there that I've picked up. Right, so that's putting that together. And then also with the green, small green leaves, I've put some of those together. Those are going to form the flower. You could, if you wanted to, put a little bit of the colour on the tip of these as well, just to show it turning. But when I looked it up online and that, they were showing like this with these tiny leaves. You could even do them smaller than this. They do come in a wide range of sizes of these simple leaves. the supplier I got mine from had two sets. One which was the small ones went down to a really tiny one, and then the larger set that went up to the larger ones. And you can assort the size of your leaves as well for those. I've kept them all the same, but you can assort the sizes if you want. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to assemble this. So I've got here, I've got a 20 gauge wire. For the branches on the side, I used a 20 gauge wire and cut that in half to do two of the arms on there, which I've already made up. So I'm just going to, I've got a longer piece of tape, yes I have. I've got some now green tape here. So I'm going to start this right on the very top, like that. My wire is a bit bent because I did this video yesterday and forgot to switch the microphone on, so I've had to do it again. So I'd already taped everything together, so I've had to take them apart to put them back together. Like I keep telling people, I never edit out any mistakes that I make, because that's not the way that you learn. Right, so that wants to go in at the top of the wire there, right at the very top, and then tape down. I'm just going to pull that down to make sure that's tight in. This is one way of making sure that things don't move around. Make sure you pull your wires down to make sure that they're very tight. Go down about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch and then start putting some leaves in. I've already bent the wires back on these because, as I say, I'd already put this together once and had to take it apart, so all my wires are already bent. Tape down about 1/4 inch and then put another leaf in on the opposite side. They don't sit opposite each other, seem to be staggered on the one that I've got. I can't show you it because it's only got a couple of leaves on it at the moment. All the flowers dropped off. Unfortunately in the UK, although you can grow them, they have to be kept inside in winter time, and it's on my kitchen windowsill, which is cold, and the leaves all drop off, unfortunately, in this country, unlike places like Spain where you can see them in flower all year round because it's a hot climate, and whichever other countries they grow in. So I'm going to go around to the other side there. So I've got one going that way, one going that way, one going this way. Go down about 1/4 inch and put another one in facing that. That's one I haven't bent. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a flower in here. So I'm going to start off with one that's just starting to open. So with a pair of long nose pliers, when I find where I've put them, under that, to get your flower, bend it forwards to put it in like that, sit it in, and then tape. And then we're going to put another leaf in below that to the back of that there. Your leaves will move around a bit, but once you pull them in, you can position them where you want them to be and make sure that they're nice and tight. Same with the flower. Tape down about 1/4 inch and put another leaf in. Then I'm going to go down a little bit and then I'm going to put another flower in. I've already bent this out with the tweezers. So that's got 2 buds showing and a flower. Tape that in. And then put another leaf in underneath that. On that side, pull that wire down, make sure that's nice and tight in. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add in one of the side pieces. I think that's the one I put, yeah, that's the one I put in that side. So I'm just going to add that in there like that. This is where it gets a little bit fiddly, so you have to take your time with it, because it's unlike a leaf or a flower, it's going to move around a bit more because you've got a bit more weight to deal with there. So get that going down, and make sure that when you do put this in, that you tape down with that one. It is important to stop it from moving around, so don't be frightened about using tape up. There we are. So that's in there, and you can adjust your flowers around once you've got them in then, you see. With these here, with the colour showing, there's no flowers in the centre of that. They don't develop straight away. We can bring that forward so that it's around the front there, like that. Right, so I'm going to go in now with some full width tape at this point, because when you're putting larger pieces in, you need to make sure that they're secure, and it doesn't matter about the stem thickening up at this point, because it would thicken up lower down, which is what happens when you start using full width tape. I'm just going to put another leaf in there. Tape down. And then I'm going to put the other arm in at the other side, a bit lower down, like that, and tape down with that. It moves around in bits, it doesn't matter, you can adjust that once you've got your tape down. The important thing is to make sure that you get it in nice and tight. Down to the bottom there, like that, and then we can move that round to the other side, like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a couple of flowers in at this joint where that's attached on. So I'll put a couple of flowers in here. They do actually grow, because I've just seen some this morning at my when I went out to do some shopping. Anybody in the UK, if you're watching this video now, they've got them in Lidl at £6.99 for small plants. So if you want to buy one, they have got some in. I'm going to put that in there, like that. I can adjust that once I've got it in. I'm just going to tear that off and come back up to there, and I'm just going to adjust that flower now. This is where the long nose pliers come in handy for moving things around in your sprays. If you want to adjust where your flowers are, you can move them around a bit with these, and go back in with the tape. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to put the same amount of flowers in a group when you're making sugar flowers, because there's always the danger of breaking things if you do. So sometimes you just have to adjust them, but I mean, nobody would know, because the way that they grow in, you get masses of flowers on these plants in the countries where they're popular outside. Another leaf down here. I always struggle a bit when I get to the bottom because I've got arthritis in my hands and it's a bit difficult to grip. So I'm just going to go down to the bottom there. Bring those leaves round like that. And then I think I might put another couple of flowers in down here where these leaves are. They're sort of growing between the leaves to the flowers on Bougainvillea. So I've got another couple here, so rather than wasting them, I'm going to put them in. See, as I say, some of them have got 2 flowers open. That's got 1 flower, and that's got 2 flowers open. As they grow down on the older growth, you get a lot more flowers on them. On the new growth, you don't get as many flowers. And tape right down to the bottom then. And I managed to do all that without breaking anything. Sometimes I knock a bit of a petal off or something or other. And then you can bend your wires round then, because you don't want it to be too straight, because they don't grow poker straight, don't plants. Nature has its own way of growing, you know, so just use your long nose pliers to bend it around like that. And like that. So there we are. That's my stem of Bougainvillea. So I hope you've enjoyed that. And don't forget to come back and see the next videos. I'm going to do an Amaryllis next. I've got a lovely Amaryllis that's just come into flower, and it was supposed to be a single petal flower, and I've never seen one like this. You could class it as a double petaled Amaryllis, but it's actually got 4 layers of petals. It's beautiful. So I'm going to do that while it's still in flower. Hopefully it'll still be in flower when I do it, so I can show you the real flower as well. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel and come back and see me soon, and take care, stay safe.